Devil, my friend. Fashion. Things to wear. Possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies, we got some shirts, we got some tanks coming up, we got some booty shorts, we got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rockin' Horror.
Horns up, fangs out. Fangs and Infernos, they have spoken, as in dominantly, because that's my story and I'm sticking to it. The Fangs have spoken. As we continue with the alphabets of horror, we have made our way to Q. Now, the great thing about Q, mixed with the bad thing about Q, is that can't exactly say there, Devil, my friend, that there were a lot of Qs to choose from when it came to the alphabets of horror poll that we put out for the Fangs and Infernos, which made probably ultimately the victor a dominant victory. This might be the closest thing to a straight up like flawless victory when it came to voting in the alphabets of horror for our polls and stuff like that, as my fellow creatures of the night have spoken, and Queen of the Damned takes the victory, and that's what we get to discuss as we talk a little bit about a little fangs, a little blood, and of course our beloved Anne Rice takes over this episode right now of the Vampire and Devil podcast. So yeah, my friend, Stuart Townsend, Aaliyah, Think Brain, Margaret Moreau, very, very cool cast when it came to this one. A cast that I definitely really like. There's some intricacies that we get to talk about potential castings that did or did not sway. But overall, I've always been very high on Queen of the Damned. It's in my top 5 favorite vampire movies of all time. Maybe or just out if I have to like sit down and think, but it's either going to be just in or just out as an honorable mention. But my point is, it's always been very high in my list. Now, when it comes to the source material, there is stuff to discuss. But as far as a movie, absolutely enjoyable consistently for me. Me and Mrs. Vamp watch it on the regular. And its soundtrack is it's in my top 3 soundtracks of all time, point blank period. I think it's excellent from top to bottom.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same way, that's what I was going to get into before we actually started getting into the meat and potatoes of Queen of the Damned. I'm a huge Anne Rice fan, so I mean, so put it for this. I mean, I have like a love-hate for this movie. As far as a vampire movie, I love this movie. I think it's a fucking badass vampire movie. I think the casting was amazing. I think just the cinematography and the lighting and like everything in this movie is like so good. Like you said, the music is freaking. Like you said, it's probably definitely top 3. I mean, it probably might be even my top 2. I think the only one that probably beats this, honestly, for soundtrack wise, is like a full-on soundtrack, is probably The Crow, which is probably the only one that kind of beats. I mean, there might be another, like I said, definitely top 5 as far as that. And like you said, it's one of my favorite vampire movies. Now, that being said, as far as going as as an Anne Rice fan, yeah, I'm like, what, it's horrible if you look at it through the lens of Anne Rice and stuff like that. I mean, I don't think that they honestly, I know like before they got into production in this, she really implored them to just do a Lestat video. Look, just do Lestat. Don't do Queen of the Damned.
The second move, the real second book.
Yeah, the second book. Let's just do Lestat. The fans want to know and want to go to Lestat. And and they did that, and they threw in a little bit of the Queen of the Damned stuff in there, and there's mixing that was never mixed in either one of the books. And like I said, it's just a smosh board of just throwing in, here's somebody who's like, oh, I like this stuff, and threw in a little bit of this, the stat book, threw a little bit of extra stuff that was in the Queen of the Damn book,
Yeah.
smacked it all together, and just made a mess. And even like Queen, even Anne Rice, God rest her soul now, she hated this movie. This she there was. She just was so, because like I said, she was so hands on with Interview with the Vampire, and not saying that Interview with the Vampire was 100% like like the source material, because anybody who's ever read the books, like even in the movie they talk about Lestat, and making Louis, and he's like, I have had centuries to do this, where actually in the books Lestat and Louis are the same age. Lestat makes Louis within like 14 years after becoming a vampire. So it's very short time period. So I mean they and I'm okay with the liberties of that. I'm okay with the liberties of this movie. There were some things I didn't mind as much. But yeah, I think they should have just stuck to just this movie being a Lestat movie, and not, throwing you didn't need to throw in that Queen of the Damned. I mean, I get that they kind of wanted a little bit of that, you know, arch enemy, kind of like, person to kind of go with. But I mean, anybody who's ever read the books, I mean, the enemy of Lestat, and and the Lestat was basically everybody who was a vampire that just didn't want Lestat to come out and say about, all the shit that he was doing with the rock and roll and things like that. But I do like, with as far as the liberties of the movie and stuff like that, I do like that they made it more modernized, because I believe in the book. It's been a while since I read Lestat book, but I think it was like he was in the 70s or in the 80s as far as music wise when he came back out. Where in this one they made it, modernized with the industrial music in the 2000s and stuff like that. And like I said, with that, it's like the greatest thing. Like you said, with that soundtrack, I love it. A lot of people that don't know, Jonathan Davis is the one who wrote the music, and he's the one that's actually singing throughout the whole entire movie. And he wrote all the lyrics before the movie was even shot. They gave him the screenplay, he wrote down, and it's probably, as far as like movie writings, like I said, it's one of the best things I've ever read, just because it's so in depth. All the songs are so in depth to exactly how Lestat was feeling at the time, and all these like angst and angry against other vampires. Obviously, him killing the girl with the violin and all this kind of stuff like that. But yeah, but like I said, this is definitely like a love hate relationship when it comes to this movie, and when it comes to us talking about this movie, because like I said, I love this movie. I watch it a million times. It's a great vampire movie, but then if you put it in the realm of what the source material that it's supposed to be, yeah, it's a flop versus Interview with a Vampire.
No, absolutely. It's just the facts. Like, yeah, as a movie, as a vampire movie, if I'm looking at it as a standalone movie and watching it as a standalone movie, which I tend to do mentally, because that's what keeps me enjoying this movie as much as I do, because I really do like it. And yeah, we talk regularly about movies that we discuss where it's like, yeah, I'll pop it in, every year, maybe a couple times a year. Queen of the Damned is a movie that I often will watch like multiple times a year. There are times that I watch it a couple times a month. Like I said, Mrs. Vamp and I are very fond of this movie. I have a huge movie poster right in my hallway for Queen of the Damned. And again, you're completely correct, because yeah, Anne felt a type of way and was completely justified in feeling the way she felt about this. I've had conversations with people who like Queen of the Damned that aren't as like vampire oriented as I am, and aren't as Anne Rice oriented as we are. That have like, well, I really do like the movie, but like I feel that like it seems a little like kind of like squished. It feels a little cluttered to me, and I can't really put my finger on it. And I've told them, I'm like, you're actually 100% right in feeling the way you're feeling, because the way this movie's put together and with the character names that are used, a lot of people know it, of course, to be the quote unquote sequel to Interview with a Vampire. The problem is the majority of those Fangs and Infernos that are movie people like that, are going based off the movies. Don't realize that they may know that these are from books, but they just kind of automatically assume that it was Interview with the Vampire and then Queen of the Damned. They don't actually know or don't remember that there's a book in the middle. And that's why it feels kind of clustered and kind of crunched and rushed. It's because they had to squeeze Lestat book, stuff in and kind of even it out with Queen of the Damned, so it doesn't have that. This could have been an amazing trilogy, but they really Hollywooded it out. The only other movie, that I can really think as far as a movie that is got such straight up source material that Hollywood just really kind of fucked up and butchered is probably Rockstar. Because as much as I really enjoy that movie, the source material is ironclad and chiseled into stone. It is legitimately Rob Halford leaving Judas Priest with Ripper Owen, a cover band singer of Judas Priest, becoming the lead singer of Judas Priest, and then having a tenure until the band either was to continue without him or, in the real life case, bring back Rob Halford. But that's for another day. But that's one of those prime examples of just Hollywood really just kind of Hollywooding out a movie. Now, that being said, again, I do like the movie. I enjoy it quite a bit. Cast is solid, but it's unfortunate where, you know, you had such a great opportunity and it was just missed on so many different levels. But that's just kind of the way it is, unfortunately. But let's get into the movie a little bit. So again, I love the modernization of the music. Again, the soundtrack is right up there with, like we were talking about before, Lost Boys is a great soundtrack, but I also find that Freddy vs. Jason also happens to have a pretty great soundtrack. The only thing with Freddy vs. Jason is that's more of just a great soundtrack of great songs from various artists. But when you look at these themed type soundtracks, that's one of the reasons why I love like Queen of the Damned so much is it was written by Jonathan for the movie even before the movie, and I just think it's excellent. I think it's super duper awesome. So many great people were involved in that. The late Wayne Static, Jay Gordon from Orgy, David Draymond. Awesome, awesome, awesome. But yes, Lestat, Stuart Townsend is the dominant factor. Over here is woken from his slumber based off of a band that's playing in his vicinity and he hears their music and that's what kind of draws him out of his sleep and he gets involved with the band, becomes the front man of the band, and then starts getting basically, looked at kind of like a hit put out on him from the vampires by putting out Vampire Secrets. Now, running parallel to that is Margaret Moreau's character, who's basically vampire obsessed and wants to learn about vampires, their hideaways, their haunts, the bars, the Admiral's Arms, which they talk about in the movie, which is also, strangely enough, mentioned in a song called Redeemer in the movie. The Redeemer song on the soundtrack is actually done by Marilyn Manson, but the funny part about it is the lyrics don't match
Yeah.
because they put the lyrics on the screen in the movie where Margaret's character is going, see, rest it at peace or hang out in the Admiral's arms and blah 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 yada yada yada. And she's like, I did the research. There is a Admiral's Arms, you know, speakeasy like bar that I do believe is a vampire, hideaway. But if you listen to Redeemer by Manson right smack on the soundtrack, there's no mention of the Admiral Arms. It's completely different lyrics. But so those are really the two main storylines that are running parallel until they do connect with each other. Is Lestat putting vampires out in the forefront, so dare I say, out in the sunlight, while Margaret wants to be kind of a part of that world as this hardcore journalist, but she's not taken seriously by the college that she works for because she's kind of overstepping her boundaries.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's part of it, within the movie and within the book, she's part of a like a secret society called the Talamascus. And that's basically what they are, is they're like vampire historians sort of to a point where they're like they study a lot and they talk about and they learn about stuff like that. Some may say, in some parts that Talamaskins were vampire hunters too at certain areas and stuff like that within the books. They talk about the Talamaskins, doing that and things like that. But like I said, yeah. So that basically, you're starting off this movie, basically is the which, like I said, so if you were a Anne Rice book person, you're watching this movie and you're like, if you had no idea what this movie was really going to be about and you've seen Queen of the Damned, you're like, okay, I guess they're skipping the second book, which is the Vampire Lestat. And then all of a sudden you start watching it and it's about him being awoken, the music, him becoming a rock star, him. A little bit of prequel of him being turned by Marius in the beginning and stuff like that. And you're like, wait a minute, that was all shit that was in Vampire Lestat book. Wait, I thought this was supposed to be a Queen of the Damned movie. And then, eventually later on, you go into it a little bit when they go back into the history of Lestat and, he goes and he's looking around and he's exploring and he's getting called into this secret cave cavern in in Marius's castle. And there is the stoned Akasha and her king. And, Stuart Townsend gets Lestat gets driven to taste the blood and goes mad crazy because he does know he doesn't know what's going on and doesn't realize that basically he just tasted the blood of what is considered the mother of all vampires. Her and the king were considered one of the first vampires that anybody knew about as far as it goes within the lore of the Interview of the Vampire and the Vampire Chronicles and stuff like that. But yeah, yeah, and it it showcases that a little bit and then goes right back into it. Like I said, there were some cool scenes. I love like when he's doing the music videos and he's going on the press release things for it, and they're like, aren't you mad about are you afraid that you know you're calling all these vampires and saying that you're a vampire, that's against against the rules. And he's like, you know what, he's like, Lestat was always one of those ones where it was like he didn't want to live in the shadows. You know what I mean? He just wanted to be in that forefront. He's like, why are we hiding when we're gods? You know what I mean? We're basically immortal. We can pretty much do whatever we want to do, and that's basically that cockiness of that, which you know he's just like, yeah, yeah, man, we're just gonna do whatever we want. I want to do whatever I'm gonna do, and I don't care. And he calls, it's basically all the songs are sort of like basically teasing the vampires and the vampire clans to like, come on and get some, and and then probably one of my favorite parts of the scene in the movie, is like, he's bringing back, typical rock star. He's bringing back the groupies into his castle and brings these two girls in, and they're like, "Ooh, what do you want us to do?" He's like, "Are you hungry?" He's like, "Yeah, I could go for a little bite." And he's playing around with them, and he's on the ground, crawling on all fours, backing up, and they're like, "Ooh, yeah," kind of getting all giddy and like, "Ooh, we're gonna get some from this heartless stock guy who's a fake vampire." And then he starts climbing the walls and he gets about halfway up before he gets fully all the way up, and you can just see the change in the girl's eyes as like, oh fuck, yeah, this guy isn't pretending to be a vampire. This guy really is a vampire until he gets to the point where he's up top and then he kind of goes after them. And that's probably like one of my favorite scenes in the whole entire movie, just because it was like that that all of a sudden they realize that oh shit, man, like this guy's for real and he's about to eat us. So it's like, oh shit, we made a mistake. And even in the movie later on where you have the girl, the Talamascus girl going, and then there's another girl that was from, I can't remember where, Tasmania, I think she was from. She's like, I'm all the way from Tasmania. And they're like, no, just the one, tell Tasmanian girl to go home. And she's like, oh man. And like their manager guy is like, no, it's probably for the best that you didn't get picked, because usually even though he might not realize that some of the stuff is real, he probably has a tendency like, why are these girls that he keeps bringing back not not having to take them home? And then probably, maybe seeing like a news clip somewhere about missing girls and that being there, and he's like, oh shit. Yeah, it's probably best that you don't go backstage with this guy because this guy tends to really eat people and stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of cool. I love that part of it. And then it's all about it basically kind of when it gets into the before you start getting into this Queen of the Dam stuff, he's like basically kind of getting this this big huge one-time concert in Death Valley and everybody's coming out and you got all the crazy people come out and Talamascus chick is walking around and she gets a scalper asking if she needs any tickets. You gonna sell her a $200 ticket? Well, I'll give you a deal for 150. And for all you fangs and infernos out there that have seen the movie but couldn't quite put your finger on who that dreadlock freak was, it was Jonathan Davis himself,
Yep.
scalping the ticket for his own concert.
Yeah, seriously, for his for his own voice in the monster. No, for sure. And I mean, I always like the concept of that. And ultimately, that's kind of where they believed the hit was going to actually take place at. And that's where the hit did take place at, but just didn't completely go through as planned. Because the one thing also about Marius is always that, that long standing like protection of Lestat. Kind of like kind of like father son kind of thing. Like, geez, my rebellish kid making all these bad decisions, doing stupid things, but God damn it, it's still my kid. It always kind of had like that feel about it to me because where all the vampires are out to take Lestat out at this Death Valley concert and put an end to him, spilling the tea, or in this case, spilling the blood of all the vampire secrets all over the place. It's Marius who like helps him kind of defeat that first swarm of vampires as Lestat's basically kind of ego continues to grow as well because not only did he always want to be that rock star, always kind of had that rebellious nature in him, just like you said, he's now got kind of like he's got the purest blood also going through his veins as well. So it's very it's very similar to like other movies that have touched on things similar to that. The Harry Potter movies and books, of course, were always very about like mudbloods and purebloods and things like that. Even a movie as like vampiric dreadful but still kind of enjoyable as Blade Trinity is, that was the whole concept of the villain vampire in Blade Trinity, is that he is the first documented one. His blood hasn't been tainted with years and centuries of like mutilation and crossbreeding and stuff like that. So basically that whole like, yeah, Mother Earth, Mother Vampire thing is what made, Aaliyah's Akasha character so valuable and so important. And getting out of the concert alive is kind of what added to the beginning of the relationship between Stuart, Lestat's character, and Aaliyah as, and Akasha as they kind of, to a certain degree, go into hiding. And, that whole kind of like, living vicariously through each other and lust and love and orgy feels kind of thing while everybody else is basically trying to formulate a game plan because Aaliyah also is in this new world, also taking people out left and right because she's just so ultra powerful. I mean, she goes into like the Admiral's arms and she's just vaporizing fuckers. So like people also knew that Aaliyah's character is incredibly powerful and they're trying to figure out exactly how to contain her, and that's one of the very interesting vampiric lore storylines that they chose to focus on in this, is that people are mostly familiar of when vampires you know bite their victims and drain their blood, is it to turn or is it to kill, which are both correct and accurate, but then you also have the knowledge of you cannot take the very last drop, as that will actually kill you because you can bite and drink to live, but you're not at liberty to completely rob somebody of their overall life force. And I always found that that was kind of where they were going dominantly in that. It's like, look, we're going to give in to the fact that we know you're going to kill this person so you can live on, but it's not your job nor your right to take all of what they were away.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, and then when you get into that part where you start seeing Akasha in this movie, that's another part where like I said, my favorite part before that was obviously the girls and stuff like that, seeing Lestat and the real. My other favorite part of this movie was like you said, the Admiral Arms one, where all these vampires were like, oh, she was like, ooh, let's stop. Oh, we're gonna kill him. He's like, oh, you think you are? And she starts dancing, and these guys think that they're tough shit. And all of a sudden, she just flicks her fingers and can burn them, not realizing that who she is. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, the only reason why you're alive is because she was alive. Your blood is part of her blood. She can control the shit out of you. So, her being the mother of vampires and stuff like that. So I just loved it where she was just fucking burning everybody and killing, eating the heart and stuff like that. And then my other favorite scene, kind of combo favorite scene is, when at the concert where she comes and she takes Lestat and brings him back, and they have a little love party in a bathtub to Deftones' Changes, which was like the best scene of just those two going at it and just the mingling of that. And then probably one of my favorite scenes, even though in reality I don't remember it being in the books, but I always thought it was just a cool one because if you remember in Interview with the Vampire, when Lestat comes later on, he's watching a movie and he sees the sunlight and he's like, oh, he's trying to hide and not realizing that the sunlight, but in this one, because of him drinking, because of him intertwining his blood with Akasha's blood and growing strong, he was able to walk out in the sun and
Mhm.
just like be able to and not not affect him, which is like he was like, what the hell is all this? But then while he was doing that and he was enjoying his new power, that's when he walked out and seen their basically backyard and their pool and all that is just littered with 9 billion dead people because I mean that was what brought down Akasha's downfall with her and the king in the beginning was they just had a bloodlust and wanted to kill everybody, whether or not they were human or vampires. They would kill and drink and drain all of them. They just wanted to destroy, and that's what Akasha's plan throughout this whole entire thing is to just to do the same thing again, rid the world of everybody and kind of rebuild a new world and use Lestat as her king, as that, obviously kneeling to her and you know, she thinks she's got him in his grips and he throws the 180 on her and like her and all the other vampires decide to have a little bit of a little gang fight with all of them ganging up on Kasha at the same time, biting. She's still strong enough that she can fling a couple off, and she was burning them. And like I said, in this scene, we were talking about before we started recording, but in this scene, even throughout the movie, you get the one character that I've always loved throughout the books, other than Lestat and Louis. I mean, who doesn't love Lestat and Louis? But Armand was always my favorite character. And for the Fangs and Infernos that I've watched Interview with the Vampire, that was Antonio Banderas' character in it. And, like, I don't remember the actor that they got for this, but that was one of my other gripes was, yeah, Lestat with blonde or Armand with blonde hair. I was like, okay, I can forgive the blonde curly hair. Maybe he went through a phase that we don't know about it. But the dude was like 4 foot tall, man. I was like, Armand was always known as, even in the books, just his description was very tall, very slender, very, typical what you would consider a goth vampire, very tall, very slender. So it was pretty cool, they're going at it and they're biting and stuff like that. And like you said, nobody wants to take that last bite till the main chick does. And she takes the last bite and, Akasha turns into ash and she turns into stone and
Yeah.
basically turns into what Akasha turned and what she was in the beginning when she was stone, still living because obviously she's a vampire and in that state she's still alive. She's just trapped in stone until somebody can awaken her.
Yeah. And I always thought the final scene was really cool. I thought it was very well done. I liked the way that they designed that. And of course you have like, the potential casualty behind Margaret Moreau's character where, Stewart, where Lestat basically the only way that he can save her is by turning her, which kind of also ultimately not only saves her life, obviously, but also ultimately kind of gives her what she always wanted, which was to be a part of that world, whether it was to include love or just to be a part of it. And that's what kind of leads to that, that final, scene and stuff where basically, after Akasha's been defeated and after Margaret's character is saved, it just kind of allows her to say her final goodbyes. Jesse, that's the name I was trying to remember. It allows Jesse to then close out the movie with Lestat by basically saying her final goodbyes, which was really mostly just to her, her professor, like her like person that kind of gave her the opportunity to you know, pursue this life. And I don't mean the vampire life, but just to be a part of, the talisman, and learn and be educated. And even gave him the opportunity to become one of them as well. But he's like, honestly, I'm already kind of too old to take on that life. Um, but it's kind of an interesting end to the movie because they are like, well, okay, we respect your wishes, but we're going to go on now to live our life as our vampire life, our vampire lovers, for then Marius to appear outside and go into the building once they've left, which is kind of a very interesting end to that particular scene to kind of leave you wondering, is he forcefully turned? Is he killed? Or is he just left to maybe a very deep conversation? And I always just thought that was a really, really cool way to close out the movie with ultimately, Jesse and Lestat just simply, walking through public, just walking through the populace as just
Yeah.
normal humans that you would think. And I like the whole kind of dim lit speed walking of the people around them as as people are living their lives, because of course now their lives are drastically slowed down to hundreds of years per second, as they continue to live on. And I just always thought it was a cool way to end the movie. And ultimately I enjoyed this movie. Like I said, I just think it's well shot, well acted, and the music is just absolutely stellar.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love the ending too. Like to me, it's the reason why that ending works so perfectly for anybody who hasn't seen the movie before or didn't really quite get it. David, who is the the head Talamascus guy that Jesse was interviewing, they come back, he gives them the Lestat's book back. He said, "Oh, thank you." And they, like you said, they ask him if they want to turn. He's like, "No." But before in the movie, you found out where she was kind of going into the realm of that, and you found out that he knew of. He's like, here, let me show you these paintings. And he showed these bunch of paintings, and in every painting there was Marius in there. So he kind of became obsessed. He's been obsessed with that. So I always thought at the very end was like, ooh, this guy's obsessed with me. Like Lestat, or maybe somebody said, Jesse could have said, hey, my guy David's got like a ton of freaking paintings of you,
He's
whatever.
not for you.
And he was probably like, ooh, let me go check this out. So yeah, but I like the ending, yeah, because it's like, does he go in there as a friendly person, like say, "Hey, I hear you have a collection of my paintings," or something like that, or does he, like that? But that's another thing too in this movie, which I thought was cool and it worked well for the movie. But it's another faux for, or bad thing for the book, because Marius in the book is not a good guy.
No.
He is a bastard. There's a reason why Lestat is a piece of shit for most of the movie, and the interview with the vampire and all the stuff that he does is because Marius was not a good father figure towards Lestat. But yeah, but in the movie I thought it worked very, very well. Like I said, you can nitpick. I mean, like even as great as Interview with the Vampire, and even people who are Anne Rice fans love Interview with the Vampire, and even people who are like that. Yeah, you can nitpick about certain little things and certain things in the movie compared to that. They're gonna change liberties and stuff like that, but Anne Rice would went pretty hand in hand, pretty closely while they were making Interview with the Vampire. So, they kept it you know s- decently to the source material. Like I said, it's not 100%, but to a, to the point where, yeah, she never disowned Interview with the Vampire. She liked that. She did like the, a little bit of the TV series when they went into it, because it was a little bit more sort of toward the source material for certain things. But then they obviously changed liberties of that, because in that one they're in New Orleans. Louis in the TV series is African American and stuff like that. So yeah, about the change of that. Claudia is, too. So it's like, like I said, I'm all for, like, changing interpretations for stuff and little things like that, because obviously you're gonna do that. But yeah, it's whenever you change the source material too much, and you keep changing stuff. And like I said, it was, like I said, as much as I love this movie, like I said, I think that it was just trying to put too much stuff into one movie, like I said, especially because the Akasha stuff and the Queen of the Dam stuff would have been really cool. There's a lot of like back history stuff and stuff that they had in that book, which would have looked amazing on camera. Just some of that stuff that they would have gone through, talk about that and stuff like that. But obviously, when you have a book of length like Queen of the Dam and a book of length of Lestat, and you're deciding to mix them into two books or one movie, then you're gonna cut out a lot of stuff. You're gonna chop around what you think is the fat and stuff like that. But then it's weird though. So you have that where they're putting two things and they're cutting and that's like that. And then you have, years later, they made, obviously everybody know they made the Lord of the Rings movies, but they decided to make the Hobbit movie, which is the smallest book in the entire world. Literally, it's like it takes you fucking an hour to read the whole entire Hobbit, if that. And they make that into three movies. I'm like, wait, how the hell do you make that small ass book into three movies? But then they make, two books into one movie for this. So and it's Hollywood.
Definitely is. Absolutely there, my friend. So, Devil, let's get a little bit into the obituaries and talk a little bit about how we see this movie. So, I kind of see it two different ways that kind of merge into one as my overall, thoughts and rankings. So, if I'm talking strictly about myself and my enjoyment of the movie and how much I like to watch it and how many times I have watched it, my obituary score of this movie is a 9, which is very high for us, but it's right up there with, how much we liked movies like Antichrist and Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So if I'm simply looking at it as me personally, as Vamp and his love of vampire movies and his love of Queen of the Damned, it's 100% a 9 for me. Now, however, on the flip side, because I do feel I have to do it this way, because this unfortunately is a little bit, no pun intended, damning to the source material. That's something that we have discussed, but also something that we have to keep in mind. Where because Hollywood really got in on this and squashed two large movies into one. Now, again, if you go to, for example, to like Barnes and Noble, they have a book which is the first three books of the Vampire Chronicles. It's Interview with the Vampire, Vampire Lestat, and Queen of the Damned all together as one physical novel. And it's like this freaking thick. Like I have it. It's right there. And it's great. And again, there's so much source material. There's so much. And it's all so great because Anne was Anne. That it's so unfortunate that they felt they had to squash so much great stuff into one, to whether it was to get their point across or to money grab on vampires or to finally do a sequel, that it definitely does its fair share of damage to those original books and the stories that they're telling and how you learn about character development all the way up to the various climaxes of the Vampire Lestat and the various climaxes of Queen of the Damned when it comes to the books. Now, with that being said, that's what makes me feel that the movie is also like a 7. So that's why I do feel that my final rating for this movie is an 8, because overall I do consistently enjoy it. I do like it. It's a big movie fixture in my life. So I feel that for me, 8 is proper for my headspace based on how much I really like it as a fan, but also not ignoring the mistakes that were made when it comes to source material.
Yeah, I definitely gotta agree with you. I mean, like I said, as far as like, as far as the movie itself, like I said, if you just take the movie as a vampire movie and forget that it's Lestat and that's Takasha and it's all the characters that from the Vampire Chronicle books and stuff like that. Yeah, it's an entertaining movie. I think, like I said, I thought they did very well as far as that part of it. It's just the yeah, like we said, it's just the story itself and the source material. They definitely, like you said, they definitely damned themselves. Trying to do that as well. Like I said, I kind of want to go as high as you did, but then again, I'm like, yeah, like I said, I love the movie. I think a 9 is a little too high for this movie versus like, because like I said, if I think about it, I'm like, okay, if I put the movie as a 9, like I said, I know, like us, when it comes to vampire ones, when it comes to these movies, vampire movies, pretty much number ones and number twos that are going to be the high ends, like the
Yeah.
9.0s, the 10.0s are going to be like Lost Boys, you know, um. You're gonna put Near Dark in
Near
there.
Dawn.
You're gonna put like maybe even Nosferatu and stuff like that because of the OG and Bram Stoker's Dracula. You're gonna put in that realm between 9 to 10.0, where
Bela
you're
Lugosi.
yeah, yeah. So when you're talking about, with this one being a 9 and then dropping it kind of down a little bit, I'm like, I don't know, because Interview with a Vampire to me, I think is a 9 straight up. I think that was a good one. I'd put that in that 9.0. So for me, I would have to, like, maybe put Queen of the Damned obviously below Interview with the Vampire, because Interview with the Vampire is definitely a superior film, not only just in general as a movie itself, but as source material for Anne Rice. So yeah,
Sure.
so if Interview with the Vampire, you're gonna put that as a 9.0, that would definitely have to put Queen of the Damned at least at an 8.5 or an 8.0. So
Yeah.
I would probably put Queen of the Damned straight up as a movie itself as an 8.0, and
Okay.
then start deducting some points because of the source material. So for me, I think it's like I don't really want to go too low when it goes, dropping some points, just because, like I said, I love this movie. I'll still watch it all the time. Yes, I will fight both sides with each other. I will fight
Totally.
myself in this, where I'm like, fuck you, this movie's awesome, blah blah blah, movie's good. You know, soundtrack was good. Yes, this guy was good. And then I'll be on the other side yelling at myself, fuck you, they fucked this up, and why did they do this, and why did they add two movies, and why did they make this guy look like this? And yeah, I'll probably be much fighting myself when it comes to this movie.
Totally.
So it's like, when you do a little bit of a higher. So for me, I don't know. I gotta probably, just because I know we usually kind of try to meet in the middle, and with you giving it an 8, I'm only gonna give it a 7,
Yeah.
just because I think that 7.5 is a good
Sure.
spot for. Where like normally I probably would give it a little bit more, but because of you putting it up there to be kind of a little bit higher to begin with, I think a
Yeah.
7.5 is a good. Like I said, it's not a perfect movie at
No.
all. And then, like I said, like I said, as a vampire movie, it's almost a perfect movie. Like I said,
Yes.
as far as that, but like I said, just because the fact that it's kind of like when we talked about the Crow remake,
Yes.
where it's a good movie, and if you take
Yeah.
it as like a Crow adjacent film, like Crow 4 or 5 or whatever number they would have been on, it'd
Right.
be okay. But when you considered it as like this being the remake in the and or at least a retelling, and you're using
Those
Aaron's
names.
name, you're
Yeah.
using those names now, that's your downfall. And I think that's what was the downfall of this movie,
Yeah.
because you should have listened to Anne Rice and say, no, 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 don't try to do this shit. Just do the Vampire Lestat book. Do
Hmm.
that. People are gonna love it, because that. I love Interview with the Vampire, but the Vampire Lestat, until they made the Vampire Armand book, was probably my favorite book out of all the books. I just love it because Lestat is such a freaking arrogant asshole in this movie, and just in that book, and so just freaking. I love it. You just go so crazy. So for me, like I said, it's one of my. I mean, Interview with a Vampire I still love in general, but I always really loved Vampire the Stop book. Like I said, until later on when we finally got my my Armand book and stuff like that, and that became one of my favorite ones. But yeah, like I said, so I think a 7.5. Like I said, I know people are gonna come on here when we watch it and be like, "Oh, you gave it too high of a score, or you gave it too low of a score." And that's the thing I love about this movie is, like I said, it's definitely one where
So
people
much
bitch about.
interpretation.
Yeah, especially 'cause, like to me, it's almost like the Rob Zombie, Halloween 2. There's that debate where so many people hate Halloween 2 and so many people love Halloween 2 and they'll just argue each other. And then there's people like me that love and hate it,
Yeah,
to a certain point.
same.
And that's the same thing with Queens of the Damned, you know what I mean? Like I said, I love the movie. I thought they did really good. I loved Aaliyah. It was another one of those like with the when it came to Aaliyah, she passed away before post production was completely done, sort of like Brandon Lee. So they had to do a little bit of extra stuff. Apparently, they used her brother's voice and then altered it a little bit to make it sound like Aaliyah, like doing computerists and computerizing things and stuff like that. So they did have to do a little bit of post production stuff because obviously, we lost her before the movie came out. So, and I think that's a sad thing because I think her career, not only as a musician but as an actress, I would have liked to have seen her see what she could have done. Because, like I said, I like her in this movie. I thought she played really, really well, even though she's really not in the movie that much in the scenes. But when she's in the scenes, you can't keep your eyes off of her. And
Yeah.
and with the vampire lore of like them drawing you in, she just draws you in this movie where she's just so stunning and beautiful on this on the screen that it's unfortunate that we didn't get to see more of her or see more of that stuff like that. But yeah, like I said, it I think a 7.5
Yeah.
is a good rating for this.
I'm with you on that, Devil, for sure. We'll definitely make it a 7.5. And yeah, and then just for clarity, when it comes to the Fangs and Infernos, like, yeah, that's the thing. Like, me, as a vampire, and then my love of vampiric lore and vampire movies, as a standalone movie with source material not playing into it, is why I look at it as like a 9. But you have to take into account source material. And that's why, with this source material being pretty heavily damaged, is the reason why I don't just chop it a little bit. I chop it a lot. I'm like, no, it's a 7 because of the damage it caused to the books. Where with Interview with a Vampire, just like you said, that movie, along with Bram Stoker's Dracula, for example, just using those two, as far as them being older style, movies, are right up there as 8.5s to 9s with the source material taken into consideration and just the excellence of execution, to throw a little wrestling term in there.
Oh
That's,
shit!
yeah.
About to bring the sharpshooter out.
Oh, yeah. That's the reason why I'm like, okay, as a final score, as my own little meat in the middle, I'll go with 8. Because, yeah, as a vampire movie, I love it and watch it regularly. That's why it's so high. If I'm only talking movies, if it was just a script written by some dude and submitted. But no, it was written by some lady, insanely established, whose material you really don't want to fuck with because it's so deep and written and just so well, that's the reason why it's like, yeah, here is a movie, here in reality, I'll go right here, but we will go right here. 7.5 Fangs and Infernos. That is the way the Devil and the Vampire are giving Queen of the Damned, Aaliyah and Stuart Townsend. Now, if you enjoy the vampire talk, don't forget that we've had some great vampire conversations already. Look back at our conversations with the great Oscar award winning V. Neil, and another interview. We had a cool little vampire talk with our beloved Living Dead drummer, where we talked about Anne Rice and we talked about things like Interview with a Vampire, like the AMC TV series and things like that. And don't forget our beloved very, very gorgeous, as Devil loves his sin and skin. Brandy Roderick was in Wes Craven's Dracula 2, and we touched on that as well. So we've had lots of vampire talk already, and that's only for interviews. There is plenty of other vampire stuff that has been discussed as well. So if this got you a little bloodthirsty, there's plenty to quench your thirst. But again, Queen of the Damned, 7.5 on the obituaries. That is how it shall be forever and for always. Always giving a lot of love out to our beloved sponsors and partners of the Vampire and Devil podcast. Remember, get your tea on when it comes to brutalities. Twisted Decor from Twisted Vines. Always, Fangs and Infernos, please make sure that you're supporting small businesses and amazing museums like our friend John of the Salem Witchboard Museum, as well as the Witchboard Museum Baltimore, and Shop Till You Drop and rock Vampire and Devil merch exclusively through Rock and Horror Apparel with our friends Mark and Lizzie. We love them for that. And they also have amazing stuff that's, specific to them on their website as well. But we will be back, Fangs and Infernos, for some more great talk a little bit down the road. Horns up. Fangs out.
Devil, my friend, I think we should have a little quick conversation about everybody's respectful celestial abodes, where it be my little coffin, where I lay my head at night, or at times that you feel that you just want to go back down to make sure that hell's not getting out of whack while you are away. Let's talk about Vampire and Devil's newest partnership in Twisted Vines, our dear friends, Chris and Sarah and Cadaver.
Oh yeah, you like scary stuff, you like horror decor, come and check out Twisted Vines. They make all the kind of cool shit, all for your house, all kinds of scary shit. They love it. You like to bring back the horror, you want to scare your neighbors, you want to conjure up a friend to talk to, you want to conjure up somebody bad, you want to do some bad stuff to them, you go to Twisted Vines and get some of their merch.
Absolutely, for sure. Everything is completely handmade by them. So if you need a little friend, maybe a round set abode, maybe you want to conduct a little evil towards a friend that was a friend, maybe no longer a friend. They have voodoo dolls they can do for you to allow for such activities. But you know how much we love our Ouija boards, my friend, and they make all of those by hand. They took care of your beloved vampire with a nice Nosferatu board, but the devil, he happens to be a Munsters fan. And not only do they do boards as traditional rectangles, but they can put a little bit of coffin flair in them.
Oh yeah, look at that coffin shape Munster board. Yeah, you wanna conjure up Mr. Herman? You wanna ask him how Pet Cemetery was? You can do it on this board. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, my friend. So again, thank you so much to Twisted Vines for partnering with the Vampire and Devil podcast, and make sure that you, Fangs and Infernos, are checking them out on their Facebook page, on their Instagram pages, and making sure that you are checking them out as they move around the country, showing their craft off at all of the various horror cons and oddities expos that they love to do. So absolutely, my friend, of course, man, horns up, fangs out for our friends at Twisted Vines.
Oh yeah.
Devil, my friend.
Oh yeah.
I think if there's anybody who would know hot things, it's you.
Oh yeah.
So I think it's only right that you let our beloved Fangs know what they can order now, courtesy of Coney Island.
Oh yeah, man. We're in the kitchen. You know it gets hot in the kitchen. And what else better for your finger foods, for your tacos, for your victims that you may be eating? Maybe some sauce. And you should get it from the sauce boss. Coney Island sauce. Oh yeah. Get some of that good stuff. Oh yeah. You like to sprinkle it on anything. You could sprinkle it on your fingers. Sprinkle it on your toes. Sprinkle it on your hose. Anything you want to sprinkle goes.
Absolutely. We have partnered with Coney Island Saucery. Aaron is fantastic. We really appreciate all the love he's given to the show, and we're very, very pleased and honored to be a part of him. So he's got 4 sauces out of various heat levels to enjoy on all your various foods, but also for anybody who is already following his socials, our socials, or is about to be, newly announced partnership with Slayer.
Slayer, oh yeah.
Coney Island
burning to fire.
Oh yeah, Coney Island Saucery does have a Slayer brand hot sauce coming out very, very soon. And so make sure that you check that out for all your various levels of spice. This is Vampire and the Devil, Coney Island Saucery. Horns up, fangs out.
Hey, it's the devil. We're gonna continue on with those 1990 horror films that you love so much. This time we're going to 1995 with some Tales from the Crypt. Ooh, Demon Night. Ooh, who doesn't love Demon Night? This movie's got it all. It's got ghouls, guts, boobies. Oh yeah, lots of boobies for Uncle Willie. Yeah, Mr. Dick Miller in this film. You've got Billy Zane doing a hold down, hold down, hold down, hold down shit. Wow, motherfuckers. Yes. And you got, ooh, Jada Pinkett Smith. Pretty Will Smith. I think she was just Jada Pinkett then, rocking it, cocking it. Oh yeah, doing all those crazy things that she loves. Oh yeah, nothing like a little Tales from the Crypt Keeper bringing you another story in 1995. Demon Night. Oh yeah, you gotta check this movie out if you haven't checked it out. It's funny as hell. It's got a lot of cool shit in it. It's got some creepy growlers and some of our favorite people who have been in this movie and who've helped this movie. Oh yeah, a lot of Vampireanddevil alumni. But anyway, check it out, because if not, the Crypt Keeper might come for you. And me and the Crypt Keeper are pretty cool, and we're tight, so you don't want to mess with us, because the devil and the Crippy say so.
Devil, my friend, I must tell you, you look quite fancy for your age. Very sophisticated, looking very good, celebrating a nice day after another nice day, which means I suppose it's time for us to talk a little bit about birthdays and the destruction, the bloodshed that comes with it.
No, yeah, it may be the 666 birthday, it could be 669, who knows? We all love 69 and then we all love 666, but June is the what the layman's would say could be the devil's birthday, so we figured we might as well celebrate the devil's birthday and this devil's birthday in June and talk about some birthday horror movies.
Absolutely, my friend, as we also pit up Happy Birthday to Me up against Bloody Birthday, a pair of 1981s. Now, Devil, my friend, I actually do need to ask you a question. I need a little bit of your personal thought, maybe some insight on this one. So, you and I have always been very subjective and very, like, straight up when it comes to the movies we talk about, the movies we review. We don't take any pot shots when it comes to them, but I do need to pitch an idea to you before we get started based off what you think. Watching these movies like I did, watching them, back to back, which I did to prepare for our conversations. I do have to pitch the potential to you of this possibly being our second ever flawless victory, flawless fatality. I'll be honest, brother, I don't really believe in the big picture that Bloody Birthday holds up honestly against Happy Birthday to Me when you go about the way the movie was designed and executed versus Happy Birthday to Me with the qualities of kills, the style of that particular movie with that kind of stylized slasher version mixed with going up against this kind of interesting for a certain degree spin-off of Children of the Corn. I when I watched them together, I didn't really think they competed well against each other. But before we make that call, like I said, it was very easy for us to do that with Ginger Snaps and Cursed. We looked at each other and we were like, yeah, that's absolutely not a thing. What's your thought, real quick, on this one? Because after I watched them, I really didn't feel they compete solidly against each other for a real slugfest. But what do you think, man?
I don't know. I'm kind of on the polar opposite on that. I mean,
Okay.
not polar opposite, but I mean, I definitely feel like when we discuss these ones that it's definitely probably gonna lean more towards Happy Birthday to Me versus Bloody Birthday, because that's a better slasher film, better film altogether. But I mean, I don't think it's nearly as much of a landslide
Okay.
beating up versus, because I actually kind of like that Bloody Birthday to me. It'd been years since I seen it, and it's just, what's wrong with a bunch of kids going around killing shit and doing shit and being creepy. So,
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely nothing at all.
so yeah, so it's like, like I said, I definitely agree that Bloody Birthday, when we get to the finale of it, is probably gonna spank the little kids a little bit. But I don't think it's gonna be as bad of a victory as that cursed one, because that was just hard to watch. At least
We-
yeah, at
Yeah,
least
we
the
we
Bloody
knew.
Birthday, at least Bloody Birthday was entertaining because you
Yeah,
saw a bunch of kids doing stupid shit and going around killing people and shit. So at least you were somewhat entertained. But
absolutely.
versus watching The Cursed, I was like, the curse was why I was still watching it.
Yeah, when it came to that one and that flawless victory, yeah, we just knew. Cool, man. Sounds good to me. Just something I was kind of rattling around in my brain a little bit as I was watching them, and after I got finished watching them, I was like, man, I don't know if they stack up well against each other. But that's exactly why we discuss it. But I will say though, Mrs. Vamp was into Bloody Birthday too. She definitely had some of the same points that I'm gonna make. I'm sure things that we're gonna discuss, but that were very like unique and a little bizarre and strange. But she definitely was like, man, it's like this really bizarre, like fucking spaghetti western of like Children of the Corn with guns. But let's start it off with Happy Birthday to Me. Happy Birthday to Me, I've always liked this movie. And it was also really cool getting to revisit, though, Bloody Valentine. I mean, Bloody Birthday, which, like you, I hadn't seen in a while. It's definitely cool, though, to get to revisit that one with Mrs. Vamp. But let's start off with Happy Birthday to Me. I mean, that one has always been a really cool movie, I felt. I've always liked the idea of it. It's kind of got a little bit of this scream before scream thing, was kind of the way. And also leads you in a bit also where it's like you feel very convinced you know who the killer is and you're cool with it. Like they kind of put it on Front Street who the killer is, why they're doing these killings, just to drop a pretty quality twist on you at the end of the movie. But I mean, again, for a movie in the early 80s when slasher movies were just starting to become a thing, I always felt that that Happy Birthday to Me. I am obsessed with calling this My Bloody Valentine. Um, for some reason, I've always found that Happy Birthday to Me always did a pretty good job standing the test of time as far as a quality slasher movie. And like I said before, my friend, I've always felt that it had a solid twist.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, when it came to these kind of early slashers like this, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying this was always one of my favorite ones. I mean, it has that same kind of premise of like, the Terror Train, like you said, the April Fool's Days, and like those kind of movies like that, where I think those movies had a look, or even like Prom Night or any of those kind of movies. It has that kind of feel to it where it's very similar, like kind of story wise, and kind of like setting up who the killer is and why the killer's doing what the killer's doing and things like that. But I mean, like I said, I've always thought, when it comes to, to a birthday party, and things like that, that this like, was a good start. And like I said, both these, like I said, both these films were, 1981. So you got to realize they were, making them in the early 80s, so, it's a different time, like I said, if the slasher films had just recently just started getting big, they haven't really peaked yet. So, like I said, these ones are kind of like those, like you can definitely tell it's the beginning of the genre where it's it's got a lot of weak points, but it's got a lot of cool points. I love the kills in this one. There's a lot of cool kills in this film. So it's like, but when it comes to it, it's like, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put this down as like, as far as like I said, as far as birthday horror, yeah, it's definitely probably one of the better ones. I mean, because like I said, you can always do a lot of movies that technically could be birthday horror. I mean, we
Yeah.
did the clown. I mean, that's technically could be birthday horror. Him dressing up like that, as a clown for his kid's birthday. So I mean, there's so many horror films that kind of like or Happy Death Day and stuff like that, with it being her birthday, repeating and stuff like that. So I mean, there's always been like that, but there's not too many like that are strictly about birthday, which is kind of which is kind of funny 'cause with both of these films, where the first one we're talking about, with, is a little bit more on the birthday side, where, Bloody Birthday is a little bit like it becomes a birthday eventually, but the movie's not based around a birthday, where, Happy Birthday to me is a little bit more of a birthday, horror. But like I said, it's like, those, connections of trying to do holidays and trying to do things. It's like, well, yeah, everybody has birthdays, so why not, make this horror film? And like I said, I mean, it definitely, like you said, it definitely has that like precursor to like Scream, or I Know You Did Last Summer, and those kind of films. But like I said, I mean, it's a good film. It's fun to watch, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely dated.
Yes.
Both films are definitely dated. It's definitely you can definitely tell, it's like I said, it's in the early slots of the 80s horrors.
Yeah, no, 100%. But when it comes to Happy Birthday to me, it is, basically centered around this group of like elite kind of school kids, like, for lack of a better term, like a fraternity kind of a thing. They've all got their oh so elegant matching scarves on, and some of those, play into certain kills, but they are all basically getting picked off one by one. I mean, you get your first kill in this movie pretty much instantaneously, where this girl is being strangled in the back of her car, plays dead just to get away, to then not get far enough and just gets epically like Sweeney Todded right across her throat, which I thought was absolutely great. And then it leads to a very interesting game of like chicken or beat the bridge, where those same elite kids are just driving fast cars just without their care in the world, almost a little I Know What You Did Last Summer feeling. And you know some of the bikes and cars jump the gap as the bridge is going up. Others are kind of like, no, I'm not going to do that. But then you got the last car when it's like super duper high up there. This car's like, fuck it, I am making the jump. And absolutely, everybody survives, but definitely bashes up the front of his car. And so everybody's incredibly like, dude, like, why would you risk us like that? And all of that. But it also leads into basically one of the main subplots of the movie, which is, our, for lack of a better, our final girl, who is almost kind of struck with a little bit of like having to rehash things, because her mom died in a car accident right at that same bridge, in a car that she was in, which caused like a lot of like brain damage to her, that she had to go through this like kind of like shock therapy type thing to kind of get over, in order to be able to get her life back. And that's what also ultimately leads to why this killer is taking people out one by one, because not long after that, you get your second elitist kill, which I actually really like, where the scarf, like I said, comes into play, where the killer sneaks up behind the guy awkwardly. Don't really understand how he so much got away with it, but sneaks up behind the guy, grabs the scarf as the guy's, working on his motorbike, and throws it into the spokes, and just basically strangle slash, throttle grinds the dude's face down.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what the funny thing about this movie is. Like, yeah, it has some cool and epic kind of kills, but the setup for the kills are kind of like, what? Like, do you not pay attention to your surroundings the whole entire time? They're standing
Right.
right there, the whole entire time. You like I said, one of my favorite ones throughout the film, I remember, was at the graveyard and stuff like that, and stuff like that. The person's paying attention, you see someone else behind them, and it's like, ooh, I'm gonna get them. Then someone else comes, and then they get to go back and getting to him again. And it's like Jesus, man, like. And but that's the thing I like about this film, especially with these characters. You're learning about these characters, and you're just like, yeah, they're a bunch of spoiled rich kids, and you don't really care for them very much. So when they're getting offed, one by one, you're kind of like rooting the whole entire time, and like you're
Yeah.
like, oh man. But yeah, like that scene was always pretty crazy. Like when they find the body in the schoolyard and stuff like that, and they're doing all that, and it's just like the whole entire time you're just like, it kind of reminds me of like Dora the Explorer, or like, where's the killer? That's right behind you, you idiot, or
Yes.
something like that throughout this movie. But yeah, I mean, it was like I said, it's just a weird, until you get towards start going towards the middle of the movie, towards the end of the movie, and you start kind of figuring out exactly all what's happening and what's being planned, and then eventually, the big reveal towards the end, when we'll talk about that when we get to that. I think, like I said, I think everything kind of fit really cool and really weird, but it's like it kind of works, but you're kind of like the whole entire time you're like, man, these guys deserve to get killed. Only not only, like I said, are they like just elitist assholes that you really can't stand that much, but they're just like blaney idiots. Like, it's like that Geico commercial, like, where are we gonna go hide? Let's go hide in the knives and chainsaw cabin or something like that. It's like, yeah, like these guys, but until you get to the ending, which like I said, we'll get to that here in a minute. But yeah, everything else was kind of like, but that ending, when it gets to it, it's pretty gnarly. It's got one of the cooler, like, especially at that time, kind of plot twists, kind of, precursor to M. Night Shyamalama.
Shamalama Ding Dongs.
Shamalama Ding Dongs, like with that, with the twist that you weren't expecting.
Yeah. No, absolutely, man. And that's the one thing that I think is like really just kind of cool with this. But when it goes to getting back to like just the movie and just kind of the flow in general, I mean, like I said, I've always just kind of liked the way this movie just kind of went with it, with the idea of like, how close is the killer? What type of kills, can they do to like, also kind of make the crowd react and stuff. And probably the next kill is definitely also one of the better ones as well, because not only is it just like an epically gruesome kill, like every guy can like understand that they would just be toast when it came to this one. And it's when the killer comes into the weight room when the big like macho guy is just like bench pressing, and he's like, yeah, this is all right, but I can do better. This isn't enough weight. More weight. Almost like Salem witch trials Giles Corey style. More weight. And he you know racks it up there, and you can see that he's struggling a little bit, and the killer pulls the guard away so he can't set the barbell back down again, and then just epically just drops a weight on the dude's nuts, and
Yeah.
the guy just instantaneously drops the barbell and just completely crushes his throat. I mean, just blood splatter galore. Like, it's definitely one of my favorite kills of the movie, because despite the fact that, yeah, it sucks liking that kill so much from a guy's point of view. I just love the execution of the special effects, where you don't really see the barbell crushing his throat, but just I really like the way that they executed the blood splatter to show what would have happened when that weight fell on him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's probably like one of my favorite as far as kills done with weight, equipment. I mean, my favorite one is probably, or at least most of them, at least I would go say is my favorite ones are all in the same movie, and it's a whole epilogue of them, would be the Toxic Avenger. You know what I
Oh
mean? The
yeah.
crushing the head with the weight machines and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, this, being, a little bit more of the, that slasher kind of stuff. Yeah, I love that one. Yeah, definitely the whole entire time, every guy in the theater probably was like, ooh, the
Hmm.
whole entire time. It's one of those ones where it's like, damn, what I mean, I would have rather just take the weight to the throat or weight to the head. Why you got to go for the balls?
Yeah, no, 100%, dude. But then it's also kind of funny though too, because like then they kind of downgrade the movie kills a little bit with just kind of this awkward, like, you know like I almost like to refer to some of these kills almost as like, you know, intimacy kills, where like they're basic stabbings, but usually there's something like really kind of quality, really, like I said, intimate and almost kind of like sexual about the way they do things. A good example of that was like when we were talking about Wolf Creek. But like there were these just great kills, like just solid throat slashes, motorbike grind kills, weight crushing, and then you just kind of get like a stab to the belly.
Yeah.
How does that work? How does that happen?
Yeah.
Was the writer on
Yeah.
a coffee
Yeah.
break?
Yeah, yeah. It gets kind of like I said. Yeah, you know, it starts off with the bang. In the middle, when the kills, you're kind of like, what's going on now? Why did they lose all their muster? Did they blow all their their movie money making wad on on the special effects for those early scenes, and then with the combination of the effects that they needed for the final scene, they're
Yeah.
like, okay, this like good chunk of 15, 20 minutes is going to be kind of lame as far as the kills. That's what I'm assuming, because like I said, it starts off with, those kills are epic, and then like I said, the ending scene is very epic. So the very ending towards the end of the movie, climax and all that good stuff is pretty epic. But yeah, that's all of a sudden it's like, oh, maybe, yeah, maybe we just like, whatever. Maybe a little bit of that extra money went to. It was the '80s. They probably needed cocaine, and they're like, fuck. We got two choices. You either need more blood and special effects or cocaine. Everyone was like, yeah, fuck it. Let's just get the cocaine instead.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like, okay, well, I mean, I suppose this can kind of be a thing and it sort of makes sense. But like the one thing I always found particularly interesting again about this movie that we already like touched on is the idea of like how they try to like morph the story, like taking, coming off of that kill as the body count is rising, which is actually pretty quality. It's pretty decent. It was like what I think like eight or nine kills, I believe, for this movie. As the story is like arcing forward when you've got your epic kills mixed with your weak little kills, is also the curiosities on where exactly the bodies are going. Because the one thing about slasher movies that have always kind of been a thing is the idea of bodies being discovered. And you really don't get that. In fact, you don't get that at all until the ending, which we're coming up on. But I do love the fact that as much as the stomach kill pissed me off, the shish kebab kill is still one of my absolute favorite kills just in campy 80s slasher. I've always just loved it. It's so, no pun intended, or maybe it is, but it's so right to the point. And I love the fact that they deliver something like that just so quick, so no questions asked. But I've also loved the fact that it's always been the kill that was, basically like, you know, immortalized as like the movie cover for but for a person that didn't actually take the shish kebab kill.
Yeah. It's just one of those ones. It's an icon. It's an iconic kill. You know what I mean? And it's one of those ones where it's like, yeah, it's kind of immortalized and stuff like that. And when you think of these things, you think of like people being killed by this or by that. When it comes to like weird things, not saying that's it's probably the only shish kebab, because I'm pretty sure there's been shish kebabs in millions of movies, but I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
this being in 1981, I'm pretty sure it was probably the first shish kebab kill. So you got to give it credit for, thinking outside the box when it comes to those kind of things and stuff like that. Because, it's like, a killer's got to, use whatever is around, and, maybe the shish kebab makes sense.
Mhm. No, absolutely. And that's again also kind of what leads towards the whole like ending of the movie, which is kind of this strange, like, it's got this really kind of unique, almost like, kidnapping that doesn't even quite turn out to be like a kidnapping thing. And that's the part that I always found like really interesting about it, was the fact that like you get the heroine, she's, taken to this room to basically be finished off in this birthday climax, stemming back from this, like, basically I always kind of just looked at it as this like failed birthday of her youth, where it's like, she's collected all these bodies, and she's like, all kind of this I was never good enough for you kind of a feel to it, to walking into the room, and there all of a sudden you're seeing all of these missing bodies, everything from like, the face grinder, the Sweeney Todd, the neck breaker, um, to what you think is just another face down person on the table, and it turns out that it actually is it's the main girl, who you always just assumed was just the killer with no questions asked, and she's just another victim, and that's where the twist comes in, which I always loved.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that kind of ending was kind of cool, where it's you kind of find out that like she goes and they try to freaking kill, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, like maybe this is the killer. And it's like very Scooby-Doo-ish kind of when it comes to the point where it's like all of a sudden like, I'm the killer now. And then you're like, okay, wait, so the killer that we person that we thought that died in the beginning wasn't really dead, or somebody was dead and not dead. And it's like one of
Yeah.
those ones where it's like, what the hell are we doing now all of a sudden? But it is pretty cool. It's just like that, like you said, that scene where they're kind of all spread out in this, on this birthday, party and things like that, where yeah, it was, traumatizing that people didn't come to your birthday party, and all these elitist kids, like that with their parents were like, oh no, we're gonna do this instead, and traumatizing the little girl, and the little girl's eventually gonna go crazy and cuckoo and kill everybody.
Yep, absolutely. And then you find out that, like, when when you thought that it was, Guinea the whole time, and now it turns out to be Anne, as she's also kind of like, almost House of Wax style, like has her like face like, taken off. Um, and I just think it's like super duper cool when it comes to that. Like, just the way that it's pulled off, because it gives that really, really cool like twist to it. And I always thought that that was like super duper rad. The and the thing that I find just like really kind of interesting too is a sequel that we never got, because you and I talk about this all the time. It kind of like sets up for like a sequel you never got, because while there's that struggle between Ginny and Anne, where ultimately your final girl, who you thought was the killer, who was never the killer, does turn out to be the final girl, as she, ends up killing Anne. But at the same time, there's almost that kind of mental passing of the torch. Um, and you get that curiosity as to, all right, I see this. There could be a thing. There could definitely be some mental disturb. And that's what I really, really like about the twist. I'm glad it looks like this movie. Again, never say never. We'll have to wait and see. But I am glad that overall I have not heard any particularly major talk of a sequel. And I definitely dig that. And I definitely hope that they leave it that way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, I mean, it definitely did leave it up somewhat for a sequel. I think it's just that this movie didn't do very, very well, as far as like it became sort of, after years and stuff like that, and the VHS tapes and, people like that, probably on HBO or whatever, they were showing it all the time. It became kind of a cult classic, maybe, later on, but definitely didn't do very well in its initial run. So it's probably a reason why they were like, maybe people don't want to see people getting killed on birthdays, or, are not really interested in that, until later on you find out, people do like that kind of stuff, but maybe it's just, different ways of doing it. And that's what pretty much goes. But yeah, I mean, as far as sequel, yeah, I think it would have been cool. I think the time has passed now. It's been, 45 years, 44 years or so now, 40 some 44 years now. So don't think a sequel is anytime planned. most of the people who probably did this movie, as far as not acting wise, but probably writing and all that, those crew, most of those people were probably long gone and past now. So it's like, yeah, I think 44 years is a I mean, some movies we've gotten some sequels, later than what we thought of, and they were good, like Beetlejuice and some of these other ones that have kind of came out. But I think 44 years is just a little too much. People are not gonna, the generation of people who probably are not gonna realize, like, wait, there's a part one, are gonna be either too young or just never was, big huge horror fanatics like us will probably be like, yeah, but yeah, I don't see people going out and gung ho, and it's not Final Destination 6. People are gonna be like, happy birthday to me too, and they'll be like, what is this, another Death Day movie? They probably think it's something to do with that franchise instead. So I mean, I guess theoretically you could kind of say that it's sort of a remake, but not really, because it's not really a remake, because it's not really the same movie. But that's what people are going to think of when they think of birthday deaths nowadays.
100%, my friend. So let's jump into the obituaries, my good friend. I don't really feel like there's a whole lot of major in depth that we really need to get into for here. I mean, I've always enjoyed this movie. I always consider it very high up on my just slasher, 80s slasher enjoyable meter. So, it's probably solidly in my top 10 just of slasher movies from the 80s that I enjoy. I don't need to pop it in on the regularity, but I probably circle back around to this movie a couple of times a year. Again, I don't personally think it's going to win any major awards. I do enjoy it, like I said, on the regular though. I do think the kills are memorable. I mean, plenty of slasher movies kind of have a couple weak kills in a good movie periodically, and like we discussed, this one's no different. But I do like this movie overall. It brings me a lot of enjoyment when I do get to sit down and watch it. And the other day when I was revisiting it was definitely no different, my friend. So I do like it at a 6.5.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, for me, yeah, I'm not as highly about this movie, highly, infatuated with the movie as much as you are. I mean,
Yeah,
like I said, I always remember it. Like I said, it just has that, it's to me it was more of the cover of the deep, VHS was more memorable than the movie.
yeah,
It's been years and years since I've seen it, but I always remember, the image of the shish kebab guy,
yeah,
and that's like that. I always, like I said, and then towards the ending, I always remember the ending. I always remember like the setup of the ending with all the people in the
yeah.
birthday out, birthday with all that kind of stuff like that and the twist. But other than that, like everything else, I was like, it's probably been 15, 20 years probably since I've seen that movie, and it's like, it was like, okay, I remember parts of this, and so I remember it being good. But yeah, it never for me was super super high. I mean, like for me, like when it comes to the slashers, I mean, other than like the big omegas and stuff like that. I always felt, like I said, I always felt like, April Fool's Day and things like that were a little bit more entertaining. I watched those a little bit more on the regular versus something like this. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I still enjoy it. It's still fun. I mean, I probably wouldn't give it as close to a 6.5. I'd say maybe 6. But then again, for a 6, I'm okay with a 6.5 though, just because we even it out. Like I said, me personally, I would probably give it more of a 6, but I think like I said, we don't really do the half decimals and all that crazy shit. So I'm cool enough with a 6.5. 6.5 is good enough for me.
Bump it up a little bit for some quality kills.
Yeah.
So that's the way it's going to be there, Fangs and Infernos, for Happy Birthday to Me, 1981. We are going to give it a 6.5 on the obituaries. Now, you can't have a devilish birthday without a vampire birthday to go with it. Or in this case, you can't start off with a vampire birthday without having a devilish birthday to follow it up as well. We're going to stick around in 1981 and Bloody Birthday there, my friend. And this one was an interesting one, just like we talked about at the top of the episode. Like, it took me a second to figure out exactly what I was thinking of when it came to like how this movie came across. I will say the one thing that Mrs. Vamp and I always agreed upon was like the concept of the movie is actually really interesting. Like this kind of, like I said, Children of the Corn meets kind of the Omen it's a very, very interesting it's a very interesting design. Like the, I guess you would call it the screenplay or the script of the movie. It's definitely have a really, really interesting design. I don't know if the execution of everything was quite to my liking, but I did. It was very interesting, like I said, as we're about to get into the breakdown. And I still think that the ending was fun. It had some humor mixed in, but also similar to Happy Birthday to me, it kind of like there could have been a sequel. It just never really materialized. And again, 44 years later, it's not likely going to be well received or probably even really be worth the money. Um, but yeah, man, bloody birthday.
Yeah. So, like we were discussing before, before we started, about the premise of both of these movies and whether it be a flawless victory. I'm going to give you your answer about why this movie will not be a flawless victory because of one thing and one thing only. Happy Birthday to Me was a 1981 slasher film. No nudity. How can you have a slasher film without nudity? At least Bloody Birthday's got nudity in the movie, and we get to see Julie Brown, who everybody loves. Julie Brown, Earth Girls Are Easy, Julie Brown. You get to see her a little nudity with a little charged peephole throughout the movie. The her sister charging a quarter, and then sudden all of a sudden she starts taking off the panties, and he's like, "Okay, you're gonna have to pay me another quarter." So that's the reason I want to start that off before. That's the reason why this movie will not be flawlessly victorized because even though I believe that Bloody Birthday is not nearly as good of a movie as Happy Birthday to Me, at least this movie had nudity in it.
Thin and skin. No, no, man, you're definitely right about that. You know what? Fair enough. I definitely get it for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, but as far as this movie goes, yeah, it's a weird, cool premise. It's like it's a really cool story. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like Solar Babies or something
Yeah.
like that. Because it's about these kids who are all born during this like eclipse, and they're all born at the same exact time, and it basically is the reason why these kids have a little bit of a screw loose
Yeah.
throughout this movie. And who doesn't like you said earlier, who doesn't like seeing kids going around killing people and doing devilish and evilest things throughout this entire movie. And like I said, I mean, it's funny because in the movie you have the two boys and you have the one girl, and the two boys are definitely are some shit. But that little girl, I think, is even eviler than the two boys, man. She's got that
Oh
sinister
yeah.
grin throughout the whole entire time. Like I said, she's pimping out her sister, and with the peephole and stuff like that. It's like, man, it's just funny that these kids, but are at that age of wanting to see nudity and things like that. But the fact that the sister made a peephole is the greatest thing ever. It's like, yep, it's cool.
No, for sure. Like that's the thing. It's not like what you're used to where you just realize that a hole exists and you can benefit off of it. It's like, no, this girl's like, I can make some money off my older sister and I'm gonna do just that. But yeah, so it's a really interesting concept. Yeah, just like you said, the whole solar babies thing, the idea of these kids being born during a solar eclipse or an eclipse, and that's what's kind of causing them to behave the way that they do. And then I just found it very interesting overall, where there's, like I said, there's very much this kind of like, the Omen or, kind of like Brahms kind of thing. But their murder weapon of choice is a revolver. Like just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I mean, yeah, they try to, they try to strangle the sister at one point with like, like a telephone cord or whatever. But just execution style killing people is just kind of the way that they did it in this movie. And it was an interesting concept for that, but also at the same time, it was equally as frustrating as well. Because at one point, when the guy shoots one of his sisters, and just while she's doing the dishes, and she just goes down, like just face down on, or not the sister, the teacher, just down on the counter. No, at the time, no hole, no blood, no crazy anything. Down on the floor, all of the same. And then they awkwardly have blood on the sponges that are like on the table, almost as like an afterthought. And I'm kind of like, nah, it doesn't work that way. It's not about the kill. It was about the execution of the kill and the aftermath. Super duper bizarre. I was just like, wait, there is nothing about the way that you just executed this teacher to have the blood looking that way that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the saying. Like, and then throughout the movie, you find out the other little boy that's kind of getting bullied by these by that. They put him inside the junkyard and into the refrigerator and kind of trap him into that and stuff like that and do all this crazy stuff. But that's the thing about this movie. It's like, yeah, when they use the weapons are really weird in this movie. Like you said, they're at a time this little kid's got a fucking dirty hairy gun and he's shooting it and like there's no recoil. I mean, like that kind of gun. Even like I said, it wasn't a full on dirty hairy gun, but I mean it's still a revolver, and a little kid like that would have been at least banged around a little bit. But the
Yeah,
the the funniest, I think, weapon of choice goes back to the peephole again, where she's trying to shoot a bow and arrow in the
it's a
peephole.
bow and arrow.
And I'm like, okay, first of all, she puts the arrow inside of it. I'm like, are you gonna fucking throw it at her, and then all of a sudden it's gonna be strong enough to do it? But then she shoots it. I'm like, well, you got no room, so there's gonna be like no real velocity. That arrow would have just went. So it's like the whole entire time I'm just like, oh my god. And then it's like, like we were talking about in the first movie where these people are oblivious. It's like the sister at this point when she tries to kill her with the cross with the bow and arrow knows about the peephole now. So
Yeah.
she knows it's there, doesn't do anything about it, doesn't close it up, doesn't put anything in front of it or whatever like that. And then with this while she's doing and she's talking and doing all this stuff like that, the little girl's poking the arrow through the hole, and the sister's not even paying attention that there's an arrow coming out of the hole to begin with, too. It's like, what the hell are you doing? It's just, it's
Until it
just,
like hits the wall by her head.
yeah, yeah. It's just so crazy and thing like that. And like, but I mean, I think one of my favorite parts of the movie was, where the kids are having their birthday and he's looks like he's getting into some rat poisoning and putting it into the cake, and then the whole entire time they're like, oh no, don't eat the cake, and it's like, oh no, it's not rat poisoning, but it's like the whole entire time you're like, wait, how the hell did he mix that rat poisoning so quick with the icing? Because it makes you kind of think that maybe he did. Then
Yeah.
like then eventually you figure out that he didn't. He's just doing it to kind of play off and make the the older girl look a little crazy and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, you're like, wait. When the hell did this kid become Martha Stewart all of a sudden? Can make freaking icing really, really quick and mix that stuff in there quick enough where he can just do it. I thought he was just gonna sprinkle it all over like that. Okay, maybe do it that way, but no, it was like, oh no, we're gonna put it in one of the little goopy thingies that they do the icing goops,
Oh yeah, the piping
the
bags. Yeah.
piping bag. Yeah,
Oh, dude, I'll tell you though, Devil, I will say one of my favorite parts though about that scene is like after she's accusing him of like trying to poison everybody, the fact that he like, runs his finger in the icing and eats it and just gives her that look was just cold-blooded. Like just like what are you gonna say now, bitch? Like
yeah,
I've eaten it. Everything's fine. Now you just look crazy. And
yeah,
which also kind of plays in later when she has to like actually has to decide whether or not to get the police on this situation because she's already because now she has to figure out a way to like call the police about this real actual situation without it sounding or being just a continuation of her just being crazy again. It's like, oh nope, she just has it out for these kids. Like this is just her, ranting and raving and just being an absolute crazy person. But the fact that so she has to figure that out. But then you also made a good point in our notes as well about the fact that it is so 80s that the officers are just so comfortable talking to these children about murder.
Yeah.
Like just another topic. It's like, oh, what kind of flavor ice cream that do you like? You know, murderous macadamia nut. Like that's what we like. Like just such a comfortable conversation where like none of this seems weird to you that you're having a conversation with like 8-year olds about like murder.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like with that too, and like I said, and then continuing on with the gun, probably one of my favorite scenes throughout the movie because it's just so comical. Where he's getting ready to, he's trying, he sees the girl in the living room, and he's got the gun ready, and he's cocking, he's getting ready to shoot her, and all of a sudden, like I think either a neighbor comes over or like somebody comes in, drives through, and he's like, "Son of a bitch," and I saw like walk away, like, God damn it. Like you could just see like he's just getting frustrated. Like, come on, man. I just want to kill, man. Like these kids are just like you could tell like once they start getting into the killing, they're just enjoying it the whole entire time. And these kids are like I said, yeah, it's definitely very, very Children of the Corn kind of feel to it, where it's just like, or don't let kids play with dead things and stuff like that. Or like, what was the other one? The Village with
The
the
Village,
kids and stuff like that. It had definitely a very feel of that stuff where,
Village,
but
Village of the
obviously,
Damned.
yeah, yeah. So it's like, it had a little bit of that kind of like feel to it, but it's just funny. I just love the way that like you said, it's just this movie, like, there's no way to not timestamp that this is like an early 80s, like late 70s, early 80s kind of film because it just has that feel to it. Yeah, and like I said with the cops, it's just like, oh yeah, yeah, this happened and that happened and murder and blood and guts and stuff like that. And it was like well, they're just they're just talking to these kids about like, hey, yeah, we're investigating a murder and one of your kids got killed and blood and guts and all this crazy shit like that. And I'm like, what the hell kind of school is that? Like, usually they just go, somebody had a boo boo, or something like that. Like, he's like, no, no, somebody got their head chopped off and blood and guts are everywhere. And it's like, what the hell kind of freaking, scare straight freaking police officer is this?
Right. But then it's also funny, Devil, because like well, as we get to the end of the movie, like the second like cold-blooded like moment for me comes from the main little girl who was pimping out her sister because after their their murderous plot is being foiled and they've got the one kid with the glasses and they've hogtied him with like a lamp cord or a vacuum cleaner cord or whatever it was they used and then the other kid was foiled and stuff as well. The little girl is basically like, oh shit, this ain't gonna go well. And the cops are on their way. Fuck those guys. I'm out of here. Like screw my colleagues. Like I don't care that they had my back. I ain't got theirs. And she runs out of the house. Happens to run into her mom that is cruising by for some reason. That I found that to be a little strange as well. I mean, it is later at night, I guess. So that whole like, do you know where your kids are thing, like going out to pick up your kids from the neighbor house, I guess it is somewhat believable. But like, she runs out, her mom's conveniently there, scoops her up, and she's like, "Hey, there's blood and there's murder, and my friends have gone crazy, and they're all gonna blame me." Okay, I got you, baby. Off we go, and
Yeah.
they drive away right before the cops show up. And then it's like the next day they're like in another town as they're basically like corroborating like their alibi. They're like, okay, we are now no longer these people. What's your name? Debbie, what's your name? My name is Debbie. And basically this whole like witness protection thing that they decide to do where they're just going to now start a new life under these false names And then there's this small little bizarre cliffhanger or this last little bit of bloodshed where there's like a dead trucker just lying mechanic guy like just chilling on the ground at this truck stop, but they never really let you know what happened
They
based
do.
off. They do,
Yeah, they
but do
do.
they? And that's the
They
thing I
do.
kind of like
They
about
did. They did. And if you pay really, really close attention to right before they show the trucker, the little girl is playing with a jack the
it.
whole
Yes,
entire time.
the
And
whole
then
time she's pumping up the jack.
she's pumping up a jack, and then all of a sudden when it goes off to the truck driver, you see that the tire went on his head and
Yeah, because it
crushed him.
yeah, because he's being crushed by the car that he's right next to and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So,
But
but I just think it's funny. She's like, "Oh, mommy, yeah, I'm gonna be a good girl, and I'm
yeah,
gonna do all this and do all that." And then, like you said, you're like, "Okay, maybe, maybe without the two, the two other boys, maybe she'll behave." And you're like, "Nope, she's still an evil bitch. She's gonna kill herself, that mechanic guy or whatever, while she's gonna get a little bit of bloodshed while she's on the road."
yeah. But that's the thing I also think is so funny about it too. Is she's just like playing with this thing, but like away from the body as well. So it wasn't just about like killing another dude and then like disposing of the evidence or doing this, that, or the other thing. She like takes the murder weapon, like, well, part of the murder weapon, like away from the scene and is just playing with it by the side of the building while her mom's like finishing up what she needed to do inside. Kind of like that scene where Jay and Silent Bob are little babies chilling by the side while the mom is coming out of the store. Like
Yeah.
it's just got that really weird feel to it. But obviously, it's that same type where it's like, well, maybe the two kids that they got can be rehabilitated, but we'll have to wait and see. But nope, that this eclipse birth is still very much intertwined in this little girl's psyche.
Yeah. It's just a great, it's just like I said, it's such a great ending just because it's like, yeah. And it's got that like where like you said before, could it possibly, could there be a, sequel maybe, with this girl, or maybe there were other kids who were born at the same time in the clip somewhere else, and it kind of tells you their story of like maybe there's something else, or they could have definitely done some cool things. But like you said, 44 years later, I don't think we're getting a bloody birthday too.
No, I definitely don't. I don't quite see it there, my friend. So let's talk about the obituaries, my good man. Let's talk about where we rank this in kills. Hey man, Bloody Birthday, your movie. We liked Happy Birthday to Me at a 6.5, but where do you see this overall?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, when with doing the bloody birthday, the happy birthday to me, like I said, I felt like that movie was a 6.0, but I gradually, agreed to the 6.5 just because I feel like a 6.5 is still a pretty good one for that. Like I said, the ranking on this one's definitely not going to be as good. I mean, I do like it. I think it's a fun movie. I mean, I probably haven't seen this even longer that I hadn't seen, Happy Birthday to Me. So it was one of those ones like, oh my God, yeah, I do remember this movie. I was like, did I see this movie before? Like, I'm pretty sure I have. And then just watching it, you're like, okay, yeah, yeah, I remember this or I remember that. And so, like I said, it's one of those ones. It's a fun movie. It's weird. It's kooky. I mean, it's not really a slasher film because it's got three kids killing in it. It's more of like just a horror film crime spree kind of doubles rejects, maybe a precursor to Three from Hell. Maybe these are the kids, the Three from Hell kids. Maybe they all survived, and that's who becomes Otis and you got two boys. You have
Spalding and
Otis.
Baby,
You
yeah.
got Otis, Wolf, and Baby. Maybe these three right here are the original Otis, Baby, and Wolfman. So maybe there is a sequel, and it's House of Thousand Corpses and Doubles Rejects and Three from Hell are technically a sequel to this, but we'll never know. Maybe we'll have to ask Rob Zombie about that one. But
Yep.
anyway, like I said, so far as this movie, like I said, it's fun, it's kooky, it makes absolutely no sense. These kids should not be able to kill half the people that they do. Why are they able to run around and do all this crazy shit? I would just punt kick them and tell them where to go. Maybe when they had the gun, but then again, like I said, it should be some recoil. So as long as you can move or dodge, you should be able to get away from the bullet because that kid's not going to be able to handle that gun too many shots.
No.
But overall, like I said, I enjoy it, and with the fact that, like I said, that this movie has nudity in it. The first movie didn't. I got to give it points for that. So
When
so for me, I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna stick with my same predicting of Happy Birthday to Me. I'm gonna go with a 6.0 on this one too.
Hi, man. I'm down for that for sure, man. And I'll also extend the same courtesies as well. Because the movie's a 5.5 for me. There was just little bits about the way that they kind of executed things that just weren't exactly my cup of tea. It was a little bit, it's not, and look, you and I are very, very, upfront to all the Fangs and Infernos about how much we love our campy horror and stuff like that. And, we don't really know anybody who's bigger Full Moon and Trauma fans than we are. So there's a certain amount of, just suspending disbelief, there we go, that does kind of have to come into play a little bit with this movie, but because they're not designed by those kind of like kooky production companies, I know, like I said, I noticed things like the death of the teacher with like a full on like 44 Magnum, most powerful hand cannon known to man, shot to the back with like no blood to just like suddenly have some show up on some table sponges is really bizarre and is kind of like a plot hole that I'm like, guys, for horror, for this kind of thing, you got to be more on your P's and Q's with that one. So the movie overall is a 5.5 for me, but at the same time, like we discussed, we don't do 25s, we don't do 75s, and the same courtesies that you extended to me on Happy Birthday to Me, I'm going to extend them right back to Bloody Birthday because it is fun. It is a unique concept. While it's got those similarities to movies that predated it, it does have a unique overall style to the way that it comes out. So I definitely will agree with you, and I'm down for a 6.0 when it comes to Bloody Birthday. And when it comes to the obituaries there, Fangs and Infernos, that gives us Happy Birthday to Me at a 6.5, Bloody Birthday at a 6.0, which means for this one, for birthday celebrations, victory to the vampire on this one, as Happy Birthday to Me takes out Bloody Birthday. But you guys know that we always got so much more fun in store for you. Make sure that you guys are showing so much love and support to our beloved partners and sponsors of the Vampire and Devil podcast, like our friends in Brutalities, our friends at Twisted Vines. If you like hot things like the devil himself, we got Coney Island Saucery. And then, of course, if you want to shop and look ever so dashing when it comes to Vampire and Devil merchandise, our friends Mark and Lizzie at Rock and Horror Apparel, that is where you go for that. Exclusively through rockandhorror.com under the Vampire and Devil collab is exactly where you will find all of our beloved merch, from tees to tanks to hoodies to hats. But again, we will see you guys ever so soon for another fun yet tantalizing and for the devil titillizing conversation. Horns up, fangs out.
Devil, my friend, I think it's time that we spill the tea. Brutalities. Vampire and Devil podcast couldn't be more excited, more humbled to let you all know that we have partnered with very dear friends of ours for a long time in Brutalities. And there's so much great stuff, so many flavors, so much to enjoy, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about it. Isn't that right there, my friend?
Oh yeah, we like it hot. Of course the Inferno likes it hot. Do you like the hot tea? Well, you might as well get some Brutality. Yeah, horror movies, puns, rock and roll, Brutality's got it all.
Absolutely. When it comes to the vampire, you know that he's going to absolutely gravitate towards that Nosferatu or that Nosferatu brew. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And we got to show a little bit love to, by all means, the biggest franchise in horror right now. That would be Terrifier. So Brutalities has brought you Terrifier. But that's just from the vampire. The devil has some favorites of his own.
Oh yeah, do you like the movie Pumpkinhead? Well, how about a little pumpkin bread for your throat holes. Ha 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 ha. And like I said, with the rock and roll fans and the horror fans, Wednesday 13 fans, do you like Wednesday 13 and T? How about a couple of those? Ha ha, with the summertime suicide and a couple other ones too. So if you like Wednesday 13 and you like the T and you like the brutalities, go to the website.
Absolutely. And so, of course, we like to look out for those that look out for us. We love you, Fangs. We love you, Infernos. But as a courtesy from Brutalities to be bestowed on you, we have that Vampireanddevil coupon code, don't we, my friend?
Oh yeah, you want to save a little dough, little cheddar, maybe buy some more shit? Go on the line, Brutalities, type in Vampireanddevil, and you get 10% off your order. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's getting into the chilly weather. People need to warm their bones. They need to warm what little skin they may or may not have. But Brutalities is the way to get it done. So that's the way it's going to be because Vampireanddevil said so. Horns up, fangs out for Brutalities. All right, Fangs and Infernos, brand new coffin nails for you. And to be honest, I can't fucking believe I'm going to do a coffin nails on this. If you remember a coffin nails I did previously for a movie called Fangs Out, man, I was not kind to that movie, nor should I have been. The fact of the matter is the concept of that thing was dynamite, should have been fucking awesome, you know, simply because it's incredibly relatable to probably how vampires would have been nowadays. Speed version, bunch of kids, like college kids, go to Mexico for inexpensive plastic surgery, and then like the clinic, whatever, is basically a vampire coven, which is what they use as a cover to get fresh victims. Should have been a great concept. Not saying it would have won an Oscar, not saying it would have been one of the most elite vampire movies ever made, but absolutely should have been a really, really quality vampire movie with a really good concept like that, and they fucked it all up. So as I'm scrolling and looking at streaming services for new vampire movies to watch, what do I come across? Fangs Out 2, Blood Apocalypse. And I literally looked over at Mrs. Vamp, who looked at me back, and she's like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like, you know I'm gonna have to watch this now. I'm gonna have to watch it, gonna have to see what they did, and I'm gonna have to do a coffin nails on it, so here it is. Basically, it's a military style movie. It really doesn't have anything to do whatsoever with the first movie. Don't know why it's titled that way. Probably should have simply called it Blood Apocalypse. But anyway, like, guy washes up on shore outside of a military compound after that typical storyline of like humans versus vampires, kind of like who's going to take over the world kind of thing. The military people are basically harboring a queen vampire, and they're trying to figure out who this guy is and how he plays into it. You know, he's got vampire in him. There's a lot of like back and forth. And overall, though, there really isn't a whole lot of vampire to this movie. It's not really a lot of action. There's not really a lot of like specific vampirism that really goes into this movie. It's kind of like an awkward, trapped inside a military compound style movie. It's all right. I mean, they tried, I guess. They kind of fudged in some vampire shit throughout the way to fill in the gaps, but overall, it's really not that great. It's okay, I guess. I'm going to give them an extra half point because they tried. I'm sure that I gave, Fangs Out a 3 because I finished the movie as shitty as it was. So I'm going to give this one a 3.5 for Fangs Out 2 Blood Apocalypse because they tried. Ghouls and Fangs. Vampire and the Devil here. We got a little question for you. Devil, there's kind of a triangle, a three-headed monster per se, when it comes to Baltimore, that I don't think people necessarily realize. We've got Edgar Allan Poe. We've got John Waters. But what else do we have?
We got the Ouija boards, oh yeah.
Absolutely. Starting in Baltimore way back in the day, a lot of people are unfamiliar with William Fuld and Elijah Bond, who patented it, and the birth of the Ouija board was right here in Baltimore. Devil and Vampire coming at you from the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, courtesy of our friend John Kozik, who invited us out to check it out and shoot a little conversation action to let you guys all know. Of course, you've seen on our socials that we have partnered with both museums, and we couldn't be more appreciative to John for that opportunity. So whenever you're here in Baltimore, of course, right attached to the Bazaar Oddity Shop off of the Avenue, you have Witchboard Museum Baltimore. And when you're in Witch City, USA, up in Salem, Massachusetts, that's when you get to visit the Salem Witchboard Museum.
Oh yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, see some cool boards, get some cool history, go see our boy John. Man, that guy is really awesome, man. That dude knows his boards He knows its history. He's about preserving the society of witch boards and the talking boards and all that goodness. And, you know, we love it. We love the fact that, you know, they were going to bring in this museum here in Baltimore. So all the Baltimore fans or all your East Coast fans or maybe not as far away going up to Salem, come out to Baltimore and check it out. You know what I mean? Because there's some cool stuff in this museum and you got to check it out because the devil and the vampire said so.
That is facts right there, my friend. Again, absolutely attached to the Bizarre Oddities shop in the Avenue in Hamden for the Baltimore established Witchboard Museum, or off of Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts for the Salem Witchboard Museum. Horns up, fangs out.